Welcome, everyone, to our Gramercy at Home author series tonight, featuring best-selling author Lisa Scottoline and her latest novel, Loyalty, an action-packed epic of love and justice set during the rise of the Mafia in Sicily. I want to thank Columbus Bar Association for being Gramercy's community partner for tonight's Gramercy at Home author program. I'm Linda Cass. We're live streaming this program through Zoom webinar, and it will be recorded. Let me preview the next hour or so for you. After introductions, Lisa will talk about her new book for 25 minutes or so. I'll pop back on the screen and we'll help moderate the next 20 minutes for your questions. You should submit them in the Q&A box at any time during the program. That icon is typically located on the bottom of your screen. Those questions liked by others will be upvoted, which means they'll rise to the top of the Q&A box, most likely to be asked. And I'm certainly going to have a few questions of my own. Another tool is the chat box, so you can chat among yourselves. Please click on the chat box now, and it will open a column on the right side of your screen with links to our April author programs where tickets will remain available. Wednesday, April 12th at 7 o'clock, we're going to be hosting Andrew Welsh Huggins in the bookstore. Andrew launches his latest thriller, The End of the Road, in conversation with acclaimed writer Lee Martin. Our next two events are in off-site venues. First, at the Drexel Theater on Monday, April 17th at 7 p.m., noted poet and essayist Maggie Smith launches her first memoir, You Could Make This Place Beautiful, an unflinching look at what it means to live and write our own lives. She'll be in conversation with acclaimed poet and essayist Sae Jones. Then on Wednesday, April 19th at 7 p.m. at Columbus College of Art and Design, we will be hosting Pulitzer Prize-winning best-selling author of Evicted, Matthew Desmond, for the book that everyone has been talking about, Poverty by America. Matthew will be in conversation with WOSU Public Media's Ann Fisher. Finally, on April 25th at 7 p.m., we return in person to Gramercy Books to launch Julia Keller's inspiring life strategy book, Quitting, where she explores how quitting is counterintuitively the key to success and a powerful way to take control of your life. Click on the link to any of these programs to learn more about them, as well as to register. And you can learn about all of Gramercy Books author programs on our website and through our e-newsletter. Sign up at gramercybooksbexley.com. Now let's meet tonight's extraordinary author. On the heels of her highly lauded foray into historical fiction with Eternal, Lisa Scottoline has returned with an emotionally action-packed epic of love and justice in Loyalty. It begins with Franco Fioravanti, a handsome lemon grower toiling on the estate of a baron within the rigid class system of Sicily. He is ambitious and determined to secure a better future, and his choices lead to all kinds of consequences. The novel is filled with unforgettable characters and has a page-turning plot that transports the reader to the dramatic and ruggedly beautiful island of Sicily, its mouth-watering cuisine, and turbulent history of colonization and corruption. I will leave it to Lisa to share elements of her book and her process with you in a moment. Also, along with being a dear friend to Gramercy Books and to me personally, Lisa Scottoline is the New York Times bestselling author of 35 novels. She has 30 million copies of her book in print in the United States and has been published in 35 countries. Lisa also writes a series of humorous memoirs with her daughter, Francesca Ceratelli. She's served as president of Mystery Writers of America and has even taught a course she developed, Justice in Fiction, at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, her alma mater. Lisa lives on a farm outside Philadelphia with an array of disobedient pets. Lisa, it is a thrill to welcome you back to Gramercy Books and to share your exciting novel with our Central Ohio community.
I am so happy to be here, Linda. Thank you so much. I miss you. I wish I were in person, but I am so happy to be here now.
Well, thank you. I can't wait to hear more after reading your wonderful book, and then we'll have questions, and I've got a bunch. Thanks to all of you in our audience for being with us this evening. I'm going to leave the screen for now. I'll pop back in about 7:35 or so to moderate questions. Lisa, you take it from here.
Oh, you are so sweet. I want to say something about Linda before. I don't know if I can get her to stay. Good, because she's modest. So I'm going to say it without her. She is Gramercy Books. You guys are so, so lucky. And it's so wonderful they have a robust remote program. But Gramercy Books is one of the best independent bookstores in the whole nation. So I'm thanking Linda for having me, and Nikki, her wonderful team, and also you for supporting them tonight. I think we need independent bookstores in our communities. And Linda is super well read, and you saw how personable she is. You don't know that she is an author in her own right. She has just written an incredible memoir about Bessie Meyerson, the first Jewish Miss America. And it really ends up being about how a woman finds her own voice when times don't necessarily support it. So I want you to know that you're in wonderful hands with her, and I want you to hear from me. Thank you very, very much for being here tonight. And to the Columbus Bar Association, I am so happy that you're here too. We're probably going to talk about criminality and law and justice and a little bit of tomato sauce. So we'll just bring it down, I hope, to a very relatable and understandable level, because as much as I believe in justice, my job is to make it a relatable fiction that is moving and fast moving and dramatic. And sometimes I like to explore how law doesn't always lead to justice. And I think, I guess for me, where it began, frankly, what started to happen, what I like to do is give the background of the book, and then we'll talk more about whatever you guys want to talk about. But basically, I started to write historical fiction a little bit, because of my own life. In that I started to remember my own personal history. Now, I'll suggest to you that this may happen to you as you got older. I don't know whether it's COVID or as you age or both. And I don't think this is a bad thing. I think this is the time when we start to think about our ancestry and we start applying to 23andMe, or we start tracing our own roots. And for me, I started to remember things that I hadn't really thought about in my past for a long time. Let me tell you a quick story about my family. I have a very loving family, but we're not the Waltons. And I thought back to when I was 7. I was walking with my mother in South Philadelphia, which is where I'm from. And that's sort of where the Italians lived in Philly at the time. And we stopped at a street corner, and a car pulled up to the street corner, and it was pink and it had fins. I later learned it was a Thunderbird, but these were curvy, big muscle cars. And the woman at the wheel was almost as dramatic as this car. She had piles of black hair and dark eyebrows and red lips. And she was a dramatic looking person. And my mother told me to wait on the curb, and she got off the curb and she walked over to the car, right to the driver herself. And seeing my mother, the driver, I have to act it out, I can barely sit down, grabbed, this is such an old story, that windows in those days had cranks, kind of like butter churns, but in any case, this woman driver of this pink Thunderbird cranked the window up in my mother's face, and was furious to see my mother. My mother started laughing, and it was the craziest exchange. And my mother came back to the curb, and I said, "Who was that?" And she said, "That was my sister." Now, I tell you this because, and gets even weirder, because my mother was the youngest of, you're not going to believe how many children, 19 children. I know. The first husband died, you can guess how. I was going to say, you should read it, not like everybody else, but evidently not. In any event, why that's relevant is that I knew all of my aunts and uncles, believe it or not, and there were millions of them, and they were in our house every Sunday for dinner. Our house was like the clubhouse for the Scottolinis and the Lupas, and we were all together. And I said, well, I'm thinking to myself, even when I was young and as I got older, why didn't I know that woman? Because I knew all my aunts. And my mother said, well, she's your Aunt Lena. And we don't speak. We haven't spoken for 17 and a half years. So I just tried to decide, figure out why we don't speak to Aunt Lena. And I talked to a half of the family, and the half of the family will say, it's because she brought a gun to a wedding. And then the other half of the family thinks it's because she brought a gun to a Holy Communion. And they see this as a difference, although I guarantee you there would be a cash bar in either event, right? That's who we're talking about. So you feel it now. South Philly, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of fresh basil, and there's basically misdemeanors. and your basic weapons offenses at social occasions. And what I started to learn about my family was I started to think back that, oh, that's interesting, because my family has some of them, because they were so old, my aunts grew up under fascism in Italy. They have a very ambivalent relationship to the law because they grew up with law that was corrupt. They don't look to the law for justice. So they make their own law in the absence of law, which was interesting to me as a lawyer, because what I saw the law they were making. The law they were making said, if you will do something so antisocial as to bring a weapon into a social occasion where there will be cheap booze, I guarantee the booze is cheap, we will exact upon you our version of capital punishment. We won't speak to you. This is a culture that loves to talk, and we're not going to talk to you, and that's how you're dead to us. And it was so interesting. And then I started to think about other weird examples of my childhood that, looking back, for example, I was looking at a family album, and you may look at your albums as you get older too. And I was noticing that there's a Christmas tree, and under the Christmas tree, I remembered Christmases, and I saw a bike in the Christmas tree. It was a black BMX bike. And it was given, and I remembered that that bike was given to me by my Uncle Mikey. Now, it was a black boy's bike. In those days, boys' bikes had a bar that girls' bike doesn't. And really, what girl wants a black BMX? Not me. I mean, I was happy to have it. But I remember her saying, oh, something about Uncle Mikey, where did you get this? And thank you. And he said, well, it fell off the truck. And I thought, well, that's, and then I just noticed over Christmases, there were some Uncle Mikey presents that fell off the truck. And I didn't really know what that meant until weirdly I was watching The Sopranos, and somebody makes a joke about something falling off the truck, and I'm like, oh my God, it fall off the truck is like a euphemism, because I used to think Uncle Mikey has such good luck that he is driving behind trucks all the time and things fall off, and he's such a good catch. I would also be like, later I thought, if you're really gonna basically give me like a stolen goods, which is awful enough, like that is not my value system, could you wrap it? Like, could you wrap it? It's like a regift. That's a felony. It's the whole thing was crazy. And it made me think about family, because I've always written about families and love and justice. And it started me thinking a little bit about families and criminality. And what turned me to historical fiction, as Linda was so kind to point out before, I've just basically given you the low rent view of me, is that I started to think about fascism in Italy, because I hadn't known much about the Holocaust in Italy until I grew up, went to Penn, was lucky enough to take a course with Philip Roth, learned about Primo Levi, an incredible author who wrote Survival in Auschwitz, an Italian Jewish chemist who survived and wrote that memoir, and really wrote it. What Roth showed us that novel for was to show us that even though you may have read memoirs of the Holocaust before, every story is a story told by a unique person, and therefore told from a very unique point of view, so that when Primo Levi, an Italian, will write his Holocaust memoir, which is astounding, it will be harrowing, it will be in part funny and horrifying, and it will refer to Dante's Inferno, because that's how an Italian will look at a camp during World War II, and that's an incredibly apt comparison. But it made me learn a lot about the Holocaust in Italy and what happened to the Jews of Rome. And I was appalled that it had never been written about in popular fiction. Because for me, as a lawyer and as a law professor adjunct, it became a really good example and a horrifying example of how law doesn't always lead to justice, but law can actually enact injustice. Because all of the awful persecution of the Jews of Rome, which was, by the way, the oldest continuously existing Jewish community in Western civilization at the time, were enacted under color of law, so that Jews were thrown out of schools, thrown out of jobs, thrown out of all professions, their property was taken, they were ultimately arrested and taken to Carpi, a transit camp, and on to Auschwitz, which is the trail that I wrote about in Eternal, because I really wanted to dramatize that. I kind of want to show what happened to the Jews of Rome, all legally. And at the same time, I realized when I was writing it, and this is going back to my story about Aunt Lena, that despite my family's origin, I am very proud of being Italian American. First, I'm proud of being an American. This is the best country on earth. And only in America, frankly, I think, can you come from a family of such humble and really poverty-stricken origins? No one in my family went to college. My mother went to high school. My father went to college on the GI Bill. But thanks to public libraries and public schools, I get to be an author on a webinar. What? That's amazing. But I'm also very proud of being Italian, and I love that culture so much for what it's given to the world, the Renaissance, art, music, literature, everything. But when I learned about fascism in Italy and the horror that it perpetrated upon the Jews of Rome, I felt like I wanted to understand it better because I wanted to explain it to myself. I was ashamed for the first time ever of being Italian. And so I kind of explored what made people attracted to Mussolini's fascism. You know, you've heard the thing, it's kind of a cliche, and it's completely untrue, that Mussolini made the trains run on time. If you've ever been to Italy, you know nothing runs on time. It never will. They don't care. They're not about time. They're about carbohydrates, and that's what matters for them. But when you study Mussolini's speeches, as I did for Eternal, you realize that what he did was tell people of Rome that they were very, very better than anybody else, merely by birthright of being born in Rome, which was a civilization that gave so much to the world and conquered the world, in fact. So Eternal's a story told by three main characters. One, a young woman coming of age. Oh, I can write that, because everything you write in a novel has to have an emotional truth, whether it's historical fiction or domestic thriller. Anything, or nonfiction humor, which I also write. And she's a young girl who has a crush on two boys. One is super sexy, the boy that everybody loves, popular, very athletic, Marco. And when I was writing Eternal, I said, well, it would be interesting to give him a problem, which is that he has dyslexia. In 1930s Rome, we didn't know what it was. But he feels dumber than everybody else in his class. He can't read. He doesn't understand why he can't learn. He just figures he's stupid. And so he's popular, but he feels inwardly that he has this secret. At the same time, Elisabetta, who's the young woman, kind of has a crush on Sandro, and they're all three best friends. Sandro is brilliant. In fact, he's a math prodigy. He's Jewish, and they all live within 3 blocks of each other, as they did, as you would in Rome, because the Jewish ghetto, as it was called, is right over the bridge from Tiber Island, where Marco would live, and right over Trastevere, and they play together all the time. And as I started to write it, because I write without an outline, and having listened to me for about 7 minutes now, you know that's true, that Marco began to answer for me the question that I asked. Why did Italy follow fascism and Mussolini? Because what happens to Marco is he feels so inferior. But when he listens to Mussolini, Mussolini keeps telling him that he's special and he's great because he's fascism, merely because he's Roman. And he has all this pride and ultra-nationalism about being Roman. And so he starts to go into fascism and he drops out of school, and I won't reveal more. At the same time, this presents a horrible problem because Sandro is his best friend and Sandro is Jewish. And as fascism rises, the laws that the fascists enacted, a barrage of anti-Semitic laws, are destroying Sandro and his family. And Marco, at some point, cannot be complicit. He looks the other way for a long time, because what I wanted to look at is complicity. Black and white is easy, gray is hard. And that's what happens in fascist Italy. And so I think that's sort of what Eternal was exploring, and it answered the question, why did Italians do such a bad thing? Then the other thing that happened, which is sort of why we're here tonight and about loyalty, is the other thing that I wanted to answer for myself, is why. And it came a little from my family's own, flirtation with criminality. I want to be clear, we were not in the mob. I think my family was too lazy to be in the mob, honestly. They were stealing bikes. It wasn't great. But I wanted to understand why the Mafia was born in Sicily, because it was. Global organized crime started with the Mafia in Sicily in the 1800s. And I said, I wonder why. And because I'm ashamed of that too. I think I'm basically the lawyer for Italian people, trying to figure out what they did and why they did it. Not to apologize, but to understand, because the more you understand the relationship of law to people and where people go wrong, you understand that the roots of crime have nothing to do with what's inborn or what's in your DNAs or that you're whatever race you are. They have to do with the opportunities presented to you, and whether you can have a chance at equality or not, which is the great thing that America offered to the world. But Sicily, in marked contrast, did not. So I went to Sicily and I started to do the research. And I learned that in 1810, there were legal changes in Sicily that reinforced an island, this remarkable island of Sicily, which I'd never been to, though I'd been to Italy many times. And Goethe says that if you've never been to Sicily, you must go, because it is the clue to everything about Italy. And that's true. And when I started to go there, and I realized, started to study the history more and more, and understand that in a way, Sicily stands as a microcosm for the world entire, because it's an island in the middle of the Mediterranean, and it's colonized time after time from a very early era. Romans, Greeks, Goths, French, Spanish, everybody, because of its location. But interestingly, for people like us who are interested in the law is always made by the colonizers. And so the law benefits the colonizers only and oppresses opportunity for everyone else. And that's what happened in the Sicily of the 1800s. Briefly put, loyalty is a story told through the eyes of four main characters. Now, unlike Eternal, where the three characters live really close, and so the stories are related, Eternal, the storytelling structure is different. There are four main characters, and they live in, two of the characters are in Palermo. We'll start there. I wanted to learn about the Mafia, so I invented a character. He's Franco Fioravanti, as Linda helpfully told you. And he's raised in a lemon grove. He wants to raise lemons. He's really good. He wants someday to own his own lemon grove. But under the laws, he can't, because it's not like modern times where you can buy land if you have the money. Only nobility had land. It was feudal at that point. Sicily was so far behind Europe in that way. Poverty was more widespread than everywhere else in Europe. Illiteracy was more widespread. The laws kept the Sicilian so oppressed, almost in an indentured slave position. And Franco cannot rise up as much as he wants to be. He kind of wants to be noble. He can't ever go up. And so he starts to think about a workaround. At the same time, when I did my research in Palermo, which was incredible, if you have never stood in a lemon grove in Palermo, when you read Loyalty, if I've done my job well, you will smell the perfume, because it is a remarkable island. And in Palermo, I found, for example, about a real life secret society that was made up of aristocratic do-gooders. It was called the Beati Paoli, the Blessed of St. Paul. And these were just men, only men. Women were chattel at this time and barely went out. And these men, they were lawyers, they were judges, they were doctors, they were professors. Because they perceived this awful inequity in Sicilian society, especially in Palermo, they tried to right it on their own. They were like little vigilantes, because the law was so corrupt, the police were so corrupt, and actually kidnappings of noble people were rampant at the time. And so when somebody gets kidnapped in Palermo, I won't tell you who kidnaps him. There is someone from the Beati Paoli. So I have a bad guy in Franco, and I have a good guy in Gaetano. He's a lawyer. He's got to try to figure out who did the kidnapping and get the kid back. As a member of the Blessed Society of St. Paul, which is dedicated to the common good, which was St. Paul's ethos. Then when I started to travel around Sicily, I thought, well, this is a good beginning of a novel, because I go and just see what inspires me. Then my ambition gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now I think I can write historical fiction, which is probably hubris. And then I decided, no, I want to write something bigger, because what I see about Sicily is so much about Sicily is different. It's not like Rome, where there's a homogeneity. It's a city. Sicily has incredibly beautiful, picturesque, and folkloric, charming fishing village. And I'm like, that's a different life. That's a different life than Palermo. And it's also far away. Oh, I'm going to have a woman in that. And she's going to turn out to be a single mother who's cast out of her home. And I won't give away too much away because of the superstitions of the villagers. Well, that can happen. And I kind of get taken by her. Her name's Mafalda. And then I start to travel more. And I am taken by what I learn about, believe it or not, the Spanish Inquisition, which didn't take place during 1800s, took place hundreds of years prior. But what I learned really was mind-blowing, and it reminded me of Eternal, because during the Spanish Inquisition, Jews of Sicily, there were 40,000 Jews in Sicily, and they were expelled entirely from the island. Their property was taken. They were thrown out of their homes. Same with Muslims, by the way, thrown out. Only Catholics remained. And my research showed me that that was still pretty much true in Sicily, even today. So that several years ago, the New York Times does an article about Jews in Palermo, because when the Jews were expelled, their synagogues were converted to churches. The kosher butchers were, they couldn't practice their religion. They were tortured if they stayed behind. There were two effects. One was that there were some Jews who stayed behind and practiced their religion in secret. In fear, they were called conversos, moranos, which is a Spanish derogatory term. And the other thing that happened is that Jews still are not in Palermo or in Sicily. So of the Jews, 40,000 Jews that were expelled, Palermo a few years ago tried to get a group of 10 Jews and tried to reopen a synagogue and could not. And I thought with horror that basically the Spanish Inquisition accomplished what the Nazis could not. They made Sicily a pure Christian Catholic island. And I said, I want to dramatize that. So I have a Jewish character. His name is Alfredo. And he lives in a mountain town of Sicily because there are plenty of those and they're dry and it's hard to eke out a living. And so he practices his religion in fear, in secret, because that's what happens when you oppress people and discriminate on the basis of their religion and you allow anti-Semitism to take root. People live in fear without freedom or equality of opportunity. And I wanted to tell Alfredo's story. So loyalty becomes the story of four people. Franco, who will give rise to the first Mafia family of Sicily in exactly the way the Mafia was born in the lemon groves of Palermo. He will be opposed by a good guy named Gaetano, a good lawyer, who will try his best to fight for justice because it's part of his faith. And at some point in the novel, all of these characters, Mafalda wandering from Sicily, trying to stay alive with her infant having been cast out by her husband and her village, and Alfredo, who lives in secret. I didn't realize they will all come together in a twist, and the story will include all of them braided together. When I was writing it, I was like, this will be great if this comes together. Happily, it did come together. It becomes, I think, kind of an epic of family and love and justice. And I must say, it's not formulaic. I don't know where the novel's going to go. I prayed to the God that looks out for authors who don't write with outlines and said, hopefully this will come together. Each of these four strands, I think, is a compelling story in and of itself. When they come together, it packs a real wallop. And in the end, I think you feel like you did. I won't give away the end, but I think you feel a way like you did at the end of Eternal. You know, Eternal is a story of survivors. And to just tell it briefly, and then we'll open it for questions. You know, at the end, since we take the characters through World War II, there are people who don't survive. And so, there's a wedding at the end of Eternal, and somebody has to give up a toast. And I realized writing the novel that the person who will have to give a toast hasn't spoken much in the book at all. She was a minor character. And I thought, this is probably literary malpractice, like you're going to get fired now because the reader won't know who she is. But then I said, well, lean into that because she's a woman. And as she gets up and says, I'm not used to speaking in public. My husband did that for me, and I never leave the kitchen, whether it's in the apartment or in my restaurant. But I look at this lovely wedding and I see this lovely young couple here, and I see the people who remained, but I also see the people who didn't. I see the empty chairs. And I think all of us know that feeling as we get older. We see the empty chairs at holidays, Easter, Passover, the New Year, whatever the holiday is, we feel the weight of those who are missing. And she says to them, it's a little like when I have to make dinner every night. And I look in my cupboard and I go, what ingredients do I have? And I'm always missing one. And she says, what can I make with what I have? And I thought that's a plight that every woman will understand, or anybody who makes dinner. particularly every night. Oh my God, I don't have rosemary. It wouldn't be nice if I had rosemary. Ah, I need nutmeg. Oh, that would be good. But you have to still make dinner and you say, what would I make with what I have? And that is essentially what a survivor asks herself. And I think it's what we ask ourselves now, having come through COVID. Those of us, we're lucky if we're okay, that we have lost people, we know sick people, or all the travails of your life that you come through and you survive. For me, I think I'm always writing for that uplift. I want to take us all through this journey, and me too, and see how we come out of it. It's not sanitized and it's not easy, but it's real and it has the ring of truth. And so at the end, I think we all feel, and we do at the end of loyalty, a little bit stronger and lifted up. Despite all we've been through, we go forward and we see what we can make with what we have. And so I feel like that's my job, and I'm very lucky for it. I love writing. I'm one of these, I still count my blessings every day. And one of my blessings is that I get to be here tonight with the bookstore I love and loved visiting, and hope I will get back to next year if Gramercy Books will have me and Linda have me back. But I'd love to hear your questions, and I'll endeavor to answer as best I can. So take it away, Linda.
Hi, Lisa. Oh, that was wonderful.
Thank you, honey. I appreciate it.
Your books are so amazing.
Well, so are yours, dear, even though you're too modest to mention them.
Well, we're talking about yours tonight.
No,
let me just say there's one question, but then I have a whole bunch too.
Okay.
Joanne says she loves the cover of your novel, and she wonders if the font used for your name is like the font used for the cover of Mario Puzo's The Godfather.
Is it Joanne? Is her name?
Joanne.
She's a little smarty. Yes. The answer is yes. I'll give you 2 seconds of behind publishing, because people who love books, I love books. I didn't know any of this stuff before, but I love my publisher, and they're very cooperative. And also this happens to most middle-aged women, that you start to get a little like, can I have what I want? Like, we used to ask permission. Now we're like, can now I ask. I don't know if I have the power to ask, but I say, I would really love it. For example, it's a small point. I love the feel of this cover, because, when you're writing, what I've felt is that when you're writing period fiction, you can't, I want the whole experience to feel period. So for example, the story isn't told in modern lingo. It's certainly easily read. It goes fast, but I'm not going to use modern constructions. Like, no one's going to say, yeah, right. That would be anachronistic. So everything has to be period. So I've even picked a font that is of the period. And I wanted the thing to feel like paper instead of plastic, which is a more modern feel. I had a map made so that people could see, which I love books with maps. And I basically, when I got to the cover, it's hard. Covers are tough, but I thought this was such a terrific cover, because I really felt like this was a book that was about a place that ends up being about all places. It ends up being about what happens in civilizations as law and justice and politics and social mores change, and what effect does it have on people. It's not going to be boring. It's not homework, but these readers are smart, and thematically they feel all this. They go, oh, that's just like now. That's just like this. And you start to understand what I think I taught myself is that crime, like I said before, crime is not endemic to a person or a people. It's endemic to the conditions that those people are asked to live under. And that's what's great about this country. That when you really have as your ideals that every man is created equal and there is equality of opportunity. That's such a revolutionary concept. And if we fulfill that, and we're working on it mightily, then there will be more happiness. That's the point of justice is pursuit of happiness. That's what they were trying to get at. That's what we were going for. So the more you have, that's why they matter. So in a way, I kind of love that, but I did want to hearken back to, because it ends up being an object lesson in how did the Mafia get started. And I asked my publisher, I said, I love the book, The Godfather. It is the seminal work. And it's interesting because it came in this country and was so popular after the upheaval of Watergate, when you had the attorney general going to jail, you know, presidents resigning, political upheaval made upheaval in books about fiction, fiction about justice. And that's what The Godfather was. So I was sort of feeling all that. And I said, can you give me that Godfather font? And as it happens, Putnam Publishers published The Godfather, and they said, sure. And so I got it. So thank you, Joanne, for your eagle eye, because I wanted that a little, but I wanted to say, this is like the prequel to The Godfather. This is what gave rise to it. And in it, you learn that Corleone is a real town in Sicily. And you start, because it's right near Palermo, and the Mafia started there for the same reasons in the Concadoro, the so-called Golden Bowl of the lemon groves of Palermo.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. That's
Right?
great.
History's cool.
Yep, I love it. I love it. I'm going to pivot a little bit in terms of just the writing, certain aspects of you talked about the 4 points of view in this book, Franco, Gaetano, Alfredo, and Mafalda. Well, 3 of those 4 are men. So I wonder, talk about writing from a man's point of view. And if that, how was that? I mean, you did that in Eternal, you've done that before, but more so in this one, you got 3 out of the 4. So talk about that a little bit.
It's funny because I started out writing way long ago. I'm 35 novels in like 1994 or something like that. And I actually started doing it because as a female lawyer, I really felt that John Grisham, there were a lot of wonderful authors writing with male main characters, but women in legal fiction and in crime fiction were kind of second banana a lot. And I was like, why is this? So anyway, I changed my life around and started writing, and I wrote women main characters only for a long, long time. I even wrote the Rosado and Associates law firm, an all-female law firm. And secretly, I think I started to go, gee, I don't know if I can write a man. I mean, and then I was like, well, that's not good. And then I said, well, my God, I mean, you're married twice, you're divorced twice, you're close to your dad. Like, don't be afraid, fear not. And I want to say this, and you probably would agree, Linda, that for people who want to write, they really should give it a try. It's not, I want to demystify it. In fact, that's what I love about Zooms. I'm in your house, you're in mine. This is my signed book collection. I think that I said, well, you should really try. And now we're at the point, which is so crazy, that so I write historical fiction now and domestic thrillers, and I'll get back to Rosado soon. The last domestic thriller was What Happened to the Bennetts. It's a male main character. And actually I just found out it was optioned for television. So it's going to be a limited series, which is wonderful. That's super exciting. But what's funny about that vis-a-vis your question is that I wrote that book in his point of view completely. There's no shifting perspective because the thrillers tend to have a narrower focus. And so there's a lot of twists. This has twists, but in any event, the focus is narrower than the historical fiction. And when I wrote it, I got a lot of email from men saying, wow, this is kind of amazing because you really do write in a man's consciousness very well. And you use the pronoun I. And I got to be weird with you right now. I didn't even know I did that. Like, I just start the book and I have him driving down the road and I have him think I'm a scenic route kind of guy. Actually, I was channeling my dad a little for that because my dad was so much like the character in Bennett's, a scenic route kind of guy, mellow, likable, lovable, sweetheart of a guy. And in retrospect, I thought, that was kind of gutsy. Like, I didn't know it till the guy wrote me the emails, what I'm trying to say. So the magical, mystical thing that happens during the creative process, and anyone who writes, and if you write, whether you're published or not, I hope you identify with this, is that you are telling the story to yourself. Hemingway says, write drunk, edit sober. I don't do that, but I do try to get out of myself. And you're so completely in a character that it really doesn't matter what reproductive organs they have. If you lived in the world a little, you can know how, and you're not writing how men think, you're writing how this man thinks. You're writing about a specific person. So, Alfredo is such a character in Loyalty, and I love him, and he's an older man, and he's a hermit, and I can write a hermit. I'm sequestered during COVID, and as a writer, I'm in my mind a lot. I live alone. And I have 3 dogs and he has 3 goats and they're like my kids. And you find an aspect of yourself in every one of the characters. And that's what's so cool about being a human being, that we, hopefully we don't relate necessarily on the outside with color of skin or gender identification. The reader connection and the connection between writer to reader is soul to soul. And that's true when you're writing it or when you read it. So in a funny way, I broke through my own insecurity to say, don't limit yourself. Just go there. And now I'm going there.
Well, you mentioned the 3 goats. I have to just throw this question in here, Lisa, but animals, you love animals and you have these 3 goats featured in Loyalty. Talk about the role of animals in this book, in this book and in some of your other books.
Well, it's funny to say, and I agree, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because honestly, it's a little bit what I'm talking about with the boundaries shifting. In other words, all of us, we don't know where our lives will lead us. If you had said to me, I would be 60 something and a single lady like forever and have like 3 dogs. I have a cat who's 16. My cat turned 16 this week and looks at me every day like she's never seen me before. I'm like, you're supposed to love me. What I'm trying to say is we all go through this life, and I think our job is to do good and make ourselves happy. And some of us find ourselves filling our life up with animals that we love. I have a pony, I have horses, I have chickens. Now I live on a farm. I moved on the farm because I like animals so much. And I realized at some point it became a little thing that I said to myself, that love fills up your heart, whether you are receiving it or giving it. And that's true. That's why it feels good to give to something. Raising a child feels good because you're giving so much. And so animals love you back. And there's plenty of people who aren't lucky, who live alone. They're divorced, they're widowed. I meet them, they email me. We do book clubs. And let me give it 2 seconds about this, because on my website, if you're interested in what we're talking about in Sicily, there are 20 videos that I took there. And there's an interactive map that really sets all the scenes of Sicily with videos I took and pictures. We also have a book club, Zoom for those in book clubs. But relevant to what your question is, I said, I get so many emails from people who go, I live alone and I'm not in a book club. And since COVID, I'm shut in or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not going to leave those people behind. They're me. So we do what's called an a cappella book club without accompaniment. And if you are listening to this now and you get a copy of the book, go to the website. You'll see how to enter. Basically, everyone gets to come in the Zoom. And now you're in a book club, because reading is all about, Linda, right? Readers have so much empathy for others. And I think it's because we read so much. We're open-minded, we're open-hearted, we're open-armed, we're inclusive. And so I want everyone included, even animals. I get it. Yes, you love that animal. And when you lose that animal, you cry your little eyes out. I get it. It's not just a dog to me, and it's not just a dog to you. And that's what's so wonderful about the arts, but books in particular, that I think it puts us in touch with how connected we are to each other, even remotely. I mean, look how robust your program is, the offsite. And I've done the signing. I've been in the bookstore and I signed at that wonderful theater. I'd love to go back there. And here we are, just as close as we would have been. We can't hug, but I'm opening my heart. Probably, I think I'm a little less inhibited than I would be in person. Like, I'm like, Lisa, what did you say? Like, you told that story? I was like, and that happens too. And there's nothing wrong with it. The world won't end if they know my Aunt Lena story. So I think that's a wonderful thing, but I think it is emblematic of what books do and why I feel so blessed. And I know you do too, right, Linda, to be in this wonderful, wonderful profession. And hats off to you for going through COVID and reinventing yourself and making you come out even bigger and better. I see you on social. I always hearts just seeing how incredible the store is and how you've really thrived in your community. You've always branched out in the community. The Columbus Bar is here. Doesn't surprise me at all. You are the connector of your community. It doesn't get better than that, does it?
No, it doesn't, but I have to say the team at Gramercy Books, that every single person is awesome. And
Yeah, they are.
as you know, Nikki is our social voice, and it's just, it's really a terrific group of people to be among. So let me tell you, there's some people here who have said some things, not necessarily questions, but I really feel I want to share this with you.
Okay.
So we have Alicia from Rhode Island. She says, hello from Rhode Island. And she said that she just finished the Bennett's, his point of view, and also about justice. So she's really looking forward to finishing Loyalty. That's what she wanted to share with you.
Thank you so much.
And then we have Teresa from Rochester, New York. And Teresa thanks you for the interactive map and videos on your website. She said, I enjoy how they enhance my reading experience. And that's such a great thing that you did. It really brings Sicily even more to life. If
I
that's
love doing that. And I want to give credit to Laura, my amazing best friend. And she's the one who figured that out. And it took some doing, but actually, you know what? We thought about, well, it was her idea, but really I love it because I find myself even, we just love to learn, and especially readers who are, it sounds cliche, but it's true, lifelong learners. So that if I watch something on television, I'm indicating my TV because I'm in my family room like an idiot. But if I see something, I go, oh, I wonder if that's true. I'm always researching even on my phone. In fact, I've included something in the back of Loyalty, my author's note, because I know that people want to know how much is true and how much isn't. For example, there's real true people in here. Baron Pisani, who happened to be the founder of moral therapy in psychiatry, of all places in Sicily. He really existed. And his story is so poignant that I kind of wanted to tell it. So it's such a cool opportunity in historical fiction to be able to sort of shine a little spotlight on this, and then people learn, but in a way that's really entertaining. I mean, I love that.
Well, you talked before about the human connections that we all make, but even your gift of crafting these human connections in your books, these characters that some, like you said, are in historical fiction, are from real people. I had that thought in my head to ask you, were there some very real historical figures that inspired any of those 4 point of view characters?
It really, none of those 4, because they're so, there's the main characters have to be. Francis Ford Coppola has that great quote, "Nothing in my movies ever happened, but all of it is true." Mm-hmm. Like those characters have to come from me. Like that lawyer Gaetano, and I'm not really religious. I don't really have a religion, but I loved that he had a credo and he put it into action. And I even feel the first Mafia family a little, like that oppression that you have. You can't, I feel that. Mafalda for sure, a single mom. I've been a single mom my whole life. And Alfredo, that I could feel him too. And especially his closest with his animals. So those main characters have to come from me. But Baron Pisani, long story short, was a man who existed. He was a real nobleman in Sicily, like all of these upper crust people in the novel. But when he lost his son, his teenage son died, he was heartbroken. They were super close and they played music together. And he fell into a melancholia, it was called then, mental illness. And so he almost ended up in a lunatic asylum, as it was called. And I went and visited, it was called the Royal Madhouse of Palermo. And basically, he started to come out of his melancholia after years of listening to music and reading books. He cured himself through the arts. And he went to the madhouse, as it was called. And he said, just as a guy, he wasn't a doctor, he said, this is inhumane. They're people treated like animals, right? Locked in chains. They were in a former convent. They were in with people who had syphilis, tuberculosis, and leprosy, and chained to walls. 1800 Sicily treatment of mental illness was horrific. And he revolutionized it. He basically totally changed it. He raised money for a new hospital. He built a new hospital. He's brought in musicians. He brought in artists, art therapy, all the things we know now that work. Edgar Allan Poe visited. Dumas visited, the elder. Booker T. Washington visited. People from all over. Sicily was in the forefront of psychiatric knowledge and therapy because of this man who basically, sadly, it's such an amazing story. There was a cholera epidemic in Sicily, 1830s, I think, 1834. He would not leave his hospital or his patients, and he perished with them. And his real life story is woven throughout this. So the minor characters are sometimes have some reality in them, or their situation, like the Beati Paoli, which is a real true situation, but not the major ones.
Wow. Well, I don't know if we have much more time, but I want to make sure that I get Samantha's question here. She said, "Hi, Lisa. I know you just released this new book, which we can't wait to read, but can you please tell us about your next writing project?"
That's so nice of her. Well, I have 70,000 words on the next domestic thriller. It is called, so it's a modern day thing. I probably shouldn't say much about the plot, but it is called the Truth About the Devlins. Dun, 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 dun. It's so funny and crazy, but let me just say a brief thank you to my readers, because, I've written crime fiction my whole life, and it was a big leap of faith and basically almost career risky to try to write something different. And I read all my online reviews, wherever they are, Goodreads, and they'll often say, and I didn't know if my readers were going to come with me, and no one did, and neither did my publisher. And thank God for my readers, because a lot of them said, I like crime fiction. I don't know how I feel about historical fiction, but I read this because it was her and I really liked it. And I go, that's what I'm saying about readers. They're open-minded. So thank you for allowing me to write both things, because if it didn't sell, I wouldn't be able to write it. And I'm just, it just comes down to what I was saying, Linda. I count my blessings. I count my blessings that I get to live a life among books and among readers and booksellers like you and book lovers like you and authors like you, Linda. It's really wonderful, and it doesn't happen. It's just wonderful, wonderful, great good luck.
And and the fact you can do both of these, they're both historical fiction and your thrillers. They're all about justice. They're really all, they have this unifying thread, and they're all powerful. They're all dramatic. I have to say, I had this quote here. I have to say this. I'm sorry, but I meant to hopefully I can see it, and it's getting dark right here. But it was Daniel Silva's quote that really got me. He said, and I want everyone to hear this, because if you don't have the copy of Loyalty, you have to get it. You have to read this. He said, "A gripping, up all night novel of power and vengeance in a violent and beautiful land. Loyalty finds Lisa Scottoline on new turf and firing on all cylinders. Her versatility as a writer knows no bounds." And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Whether you're writing, What Happened to the Bennetts, or you're writing Eternal and Loyalty, you are doing it for us, my dear. And I am so thrilled to have you on this program. I look forward to bringing you back to the Drexel for the next book. And just thank you so much for all that you do. You inspire so many of us, me very much. So and thank you everyone in the audience for joining. For the terrific questions. And just everyone, let your friends know about this book, because it is fabulous. And I know we've added a link in the chat box where you can purchase a copy of Loyalty if you haven't already. So please do so. And Lisa, thank you so very much.
So much. And thank you, everyone. And please do support the bookstore. If you're going to get the book, get it here.
Thanks. Thank you
so much.
Love
Bye-bye,
you.
everybody. Bye, Linda. Bye, Nikki.
See ya.